we can hit record. Tonight, we're going to talk about the Valley of the Dry Bones.
Going to Arizona? Sounds like it.
Never heard about the Valley of the Dry Bones? What's interesting is that members of other faiths love this prophecy, about the prophecy of the Valley of the Dry Bones. And in Christianity, it's talked about extensively. Let's pipe up the volume here. But in Judaism, it doesn't necessarily get the same recognition. It's a prophecy that comes from the portion of Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel. Why are we talking about the Valley of the Dry Bones? First of all, it's super, super cool. It's about a bunch of dry bones getting up and coming to life. I mean, do you need an excuse to talk about something like that, Artie?
Sounds like a Johnny Depp movie.
There you go. Except that the starring character has a beard. Another depth similarity. Ezekiel had a beard. No funky glasses or anything like that. And probably no strange accent. Well, maybe he was in Israel, so you never know. But the similarities, I think, pretty much end there. But in this exciting episode about the Valley of the Dry Bones is going to teach us tonight how we ultimately take obstacles, overcome them, and keep ourselves focused on the end game. And not only do we stay focused, but these obstacles that we go through in life ultimately become our greatest motivation for success. All of this you're going to learn from a bunch of dry bones in a valley in the next 55 minutes. So when we read the Torah, we read different sections from the 5 books of Moses. And generally the Torah is designed to instruct us, to guide us. It has a specific structure that's more built on law and procedure, what to do and what not to do. And then we have the Haftorah. The Haftorah is designed differently than the Torah. It usually is pulled from prophets or scriptures. And the Haftorah is there to inspire us, or sometimes to scare us. But it's more emotionally charged and emotionally driven than the rest of the Torah reading. And in fact, just this past week, I was teaching a young boy his bar mitzvah portion. And in reading the Haftorah, you can see a real change. And this kid, who's not even 13 years old, he says, it sounds very passionate, very moving when you read the Haftorah. In ways very different than the Torah reading. The Torah reading is more melodic. It's got a nice melody, and it goes up and it goes down. But the Haftorah is dramatic. It's dramatic. And it's designed to touch a little bit more of our heart, whereas the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, touches a little bit more of our head. And of course, to be effective, you have to develop an attachment with something on both levels. You got to hit it with the head, and you got to hit it with the heart. And that's where you secure any relationship, any connection, any transaction. Step 1, learn how to drink water. Furball. So, you got intellectual, you got emotional, and then you've got physical. That's the way we approach our interaction with these different experiences. So let's talk about the Valley of the Dry Bones. What takes place in the Valley of Dry Bones? Thank you, Diane. So the prophet Ezekiel is standing around in this valley in the southern part of Israel, and all of a sudden, he sees in the midst of the valley a bunch of
Dry bones.
Dry bones. Very good. You guys are quick learners. I think all this is starting to pay off. I'm starting to see it. And it says like this, and he made me pass by them, around about them, and there were so many of them, and they were exceedingly dry. This is the prophet Ezekiel talking. He says, all of a sudden he hears Hashem calling to him. God's calling out to him. He says, Son of man, can these bones become alive? So what does Ezekiel answer back? Only God knows. What are you asking me? You've got all the answers. I don't know if the bones can come alive or not. So Hashem responds back to him, prophecy over these bones. These bones hear the word of God. Behold, I will cause the Spirit to enter into you, and you shall live. And I will lay sinews upon you, and I will make flesh grow over you, and skin, and I will breathe into you life. So I prophesied as I was commanded. Ezekiel repeats what he's supposed to repeat. He's preaching to a bunch of dry bones, okay? Just picture that. That's when you know a guy is really committed. In both definitions of the word committed. I mean, when Hashem tells you to go and preach to a synagogue of 400 people, whatever, it's not too much of a stretch. When he says, go into a valley and preach to dry bones, that's when you're...
Captive audience, not going anywhere.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Not sleeping.
Not sleeping.
No snoring.
Nobody's going to harass you.
No tomatoes. That's true. That's true. So he go ahead and says the prophecy, and behold, sinews start to grow upon them, and flesh comes over them, and skin covers them, but there's no spirit. So these bodies start to take form. I'm not making it up, it's right here. But there's no spirit. Then Hashem says to me, prophesies that Hashem will come from the four sides and breathe spirit into these slain ones, these people that were slain, and they will come to life. And so, indeed, he prophesizes, and they come to life. Then he says, Son of man, these bones are all of the house of Israel. These are all Jewish people. Our bones have become dried up, and hope is lost. And therefore, you should go and tell them that Hashem says, I open your graves, and I cause you to come out of your graves, as my people Israel come home to the land of Israel. And then you shall know that I am God when I open your graves and lead you up out of your graves, and I will put the Spirit into you, and you shall live once again. So, it's very exciting, wonderful for a sci-fi movie. Maybe Zombies #4. We could start it off right here in the middle of Israel, in a deep valley next to the Dead Sea. He's in the valley. Hashem tells him, all right, prophesies that you've got a bunch of dry bones, but they're going to start to grow flesh and sinews and skin. They're going to come to life, and spirit's going to come into them. But do you know what these bones are saying? These bones are saying that we were slain, and there's no hope. And Hashem says, no, there's always hope. There's always hope. Yes, you may be slain, you may be laying down, but eventually God will raise you from your graves and bring you back to the land of Israel. What does it mean? What is it referring to? What's the significance? Why is it relevant to Passover? Why hasn't Disney jumped all over this? Right? For the next Johnny Depp movie after the pirates finally run out. Those are all valid and legitimate questions. But one thing is without a doubt, this is a powerful story because Passover, a seminal part of our life cycle, of our calendar year. In fact, more people celebrate Passover in Israel than Yom Kippur. Passover is the most celebrated holiday in Israel. I don't know if they have statistics for Jewry outside of Israel, but in Israel, they've done multiple surveys. Passover is the most celebrated holiday. And I would argue that it probably is pretty accurate here in America too. Because there are many, many people that don't necessarily make it to Yom Kippur, but almost everyone does a Passover Seder. Even non-Jewish people attend Seder. If it's for the matzah, one person told me that she can't get enough of the maror. Maybe she's not eating the right stuff. I don't know, but Passover is definitely become a major part and has always been a major part of our identity. And here is the Haftorah for Passover, the prophecy of the Valley of Dry Bones. So let's explore what exactly this prophecy signifies. And this is not a simple thing. Of course, rabbis are going to look at something like this and walk away with 100 different interpretations. And that's all before they get to lunchtime. The Talmud says the following. Was that already?
Only 5 rabbis.
Only 5. Let's see here.
5 rabbis with 100 opinions.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's pretty close.
Interpretations.
Pretty close. So, first rabbi comes along, Rebbe Eliezer, and what does he say? He says that the dead whom Ezekiel resurrected stood up, uttered a song, and then immediately died. What song did they utter? That the Lord slays in righteous and revives in mercy. Okay. The whole point was that these people should get up, sing a song, attest to the fact that people have to die, but ultimately God avenges their death and they will be revived with the ultimate resurrection. Okay, that's his opinion, and Ezekiel transcribes that, and it's important because now you and I both know that sometimes people are killed for whatever reason, but ultimately they will be brought back, and that will be the completion of that true justice. Opinion number one. ¿Está bien? Good. Rabbi Joshua comes along and says, no, he says, they sang that the Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and he brings up. Okay, a different song. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we got to explain something different. He says, it was truth, it was a parable. Talk about something cryptic. I mean, the guy says it was truth, but it was a parable. Rabbi Nechemia comes along and says, are you off your rocker? If it's truth, why is it a parable? And if it's a parable, then why is it truth? Rather say thus, in truth, it was but a parable. He adds a little grammar. Don't worry, the other rabbi doesn't agree with him. But this is what he says. I mean, we have these multiple opinions. Then we've got Rabbi Eliezer that comes along and says, the dead whom Yechezkel revived, who were these people, these dry bones in the valley? They were married wives who bore sons and daughters. These people that were dead, they didn't just come alive for a minute. They came back to life. They went and dispersed themselves among the cities, and they gave birth. They had descendants.
And then they came back.
No, it doesn't say whether they came back or not.
So they didn't die.
According to his opinion, no.
Okay.
And then finally, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira comes along and says, I am one of their descendants. Here, look. Here's the tefillin that my grandfather used to carry. So, we have a lot of very interesting interpretations, a lot of different perspectives. One person is sharing with us, we've got a few different opinions. Let's generalize them. The first opinion says that they awoke and they sang a song. Which song is also a subject to discussion, but they sang a song attesting to God's justice and ultimate resurrection, and then they passed away again. The second opinion comes along and says that this episode didn't truly happen. It was a parable, right? And then we had two arguments in that. Parable truth or parable. So it's not literal, it's a parable. Ezekiel's telling us a story that teaches us a lesson, but it didn't literally happen. And the third opinion comes along and says, no, this was actual people. They were revived. They got up, they went, they rejoined society. Three different interpretations. Whom were these people? That's strange. You find this story strange?
So far. What else would not be?
You know, you see, with me, I don't find these things strange. If I could believe that the sea split, the Red Sea split, then what's the difference with the dry bones? It's freaky, it's weird, it's ghoulish, it's morbid. Yes, but once you got one miracle, I mean, anything else is like, you know.
Still unique.
Oh, it's definitely unique. Don't misunderstand. It's very unique. So who were these people that were slain that were here? So he says that these were people that came from the tribe of Ephraim. The tribe of Ephraim had a bunch of men that died, and they were slain right in this area by a neighboring tribe, the men of Gat, and those were the dead bones that were inside of this valley. Not so simple. We have an argument. Who were these bones? No, the rabbi comes along and says, no, this is not who it was. He says they were men who lacked the vitalizing sap of good deeds. Oh. These were a bunch of people that, why were they dry bones? Because they didn't perform enough positive actions. When you perform something positive, it's like adding vitality, like a sap. And when you don't have that, your bones dry up. That's what it means, dry bones. Dry bones, they lack that vitality of life that comes through positive action. Shmuel says that they were people that didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead. So they had to go through this entire episode in order to strengthen that belief. Look, you didn't believe. I'll show you. You see, your bones have come back to life. Same way they came back to life now. They'll come back to life in the end of days. I mean, this is 10 rabbis and 100 opinions to the fullest. Rabbi Yitzchak comes along and says, no, these were people that did abominable things. Rabbi Yochanan says, these were the dead of the plain of Dura. This is interesting. So who were the children of the plain of Dura? There was a group of people from that lived in the southern part of Israel, and their men, these men were beautiful, beautiful men. Beautiful men.
Beautiful men.
Handsome, gorgeous looking men. It exists, Karen. And they lived in this area just down the river. Nebuchadnezzar comes and destroys the temple in Jerusalem, Nebuchadnezzar. And as he's marching all of the exiles, marching all of the Jewish people back to Babylonia, he passes by this area. And he hears that there's these beautiful, beautiful men in town. The women start going crazy. All the Babylonian women want to see where the guys are. They want to meet them. They want to hang out with them. Naturally, this infuriates Nebuchadnezzar and the other Babylonians. So they decide that they're going to kill everyone. But not only are they going to kill them, they're going to trample them until their features were indistinguishable. Because after they killed them, it says that the women still lusted after them because their beauty was still preserved. So therefore they had to trample them. And that's why it was known as the dry bones specifically. Okay.
Sounds the most plausible.
That sounds the most plausible. The scorn of the woman or the jealousy of the man?
Competition.
That is true. This is honestly, Hertz is very right. This is a very strange episode. Very strange episode. And it's not so much because of the miraculous nature of it. The entire story is just very cryptic, very strange, very short, very concise, and it's very hard to understand and see any relevancy to the story at all. There's very little interaction with this group in the Valley of the Dry Bones and anyone else.
What happened to the women that went out into the... One of the earlier ones was that they were pregnant women that went out and had kids, right?
They were men. They went and impregnated other women. These were all men.
Not this one, but one of the earlier discussions.
All the dry bones are men. Everyone agrees to that. They said that the men rose up, went into the cities, and impregnated women and had children with them. But all of them say there are men. Another person says that it was the people that left Egypt before they were supposed to. I mean, there's so many different opinions, but the one thing that you have to understand is that this is supposed to be relevant to you and me. So I respect the fact that the rabbis, well, it's supposed to be, if not, you wouldn't read it on the Passover. I respect the fact that the rabbis have a discussion, theoreticals, and maybe it happened this way, and maybe it happened that way, and it was these people, and it was that people, and maybe they were killed by their wives, and then, they decided to fillet them. I mean, you hear some of the things that people do these days? Who knows? But why is it relevant to me? How is this story change or inspire my life? On Passover, a day that's already pretty jacked up. It's one of those days that's up there, and you're up there. This is Passover. You're celebrating the birth of the nation. We're leaving Egypt, and you give me dry bones. You're a little bit left wondering, where do I go from here? Kind of a letdown after that whole Passover Haggadah experience. So, this vision that Ezekiel has, this vision is not a vision of a specific event. It's a vision that encapsulates our entire history. This vision encapsulates our entire history, and it can be seen in many, many different levels and different examples. It can be seen on a psychological level, it can be seen on a historical level, and even on a spiritual level. But this is not a vision about just some bones And here's what happened to this group of people in a valley in Israel. This is a reflection of our life's story. 60 years ago, when the Jewish people were suffering the Holocaust, they found in Auschwitz 7,000 people. That's it that was left there. 7,000 people. And people were obviously emaciated and broken physically, spiritually, and emotionally. But that was pretty much it that they found. Everything else had already been destroyed. Russians later on found 865,000 women dresses, 348,000 sets of men's suits, 38,000 pairs of men's shoes. And people started to get a sense of what was taking place, what was transpiring. The scale of what took place wasn't really fully known till after the dust started to settle. However, people understood that bad things were happening already by the late 40s. Even if you lived in the United States, even if you didn't have television or an internet, enough rumors and people had broken out to tell the story of what was taking place. And one of the things that we still grapple with today is the lack of action by the Allied groups. It's been documented many times, and you can see from the aerial photography of some of these bombers that were flying over areas like Auschwitz and chose not to bomb them. Literally, flying. There was one city called Monowitz, where there was a petrochemical complex, and it was a mission to go and bomb that petrochemical complex. We're talking about a complex that's adjacent to Auschwitz. It was bombed in April of 1944. April of 1944. From April of 1944 till 1945, till January of 1945, when Auschwitz was liberated, 500,000 people were killed because they accelerated the rate at which they were killing people. Almost 20,000 people were being killed a day. So while you can understand and reflect on what took place, and you can ask yourself how this was done by a small group of people, essentially everybody finds some culpability and responsibility for what took place. And when you start to understand that as a people, you have a difficult time. Why? Because for you to say that it was done, this Holocaust was carried out by one specific group of people, you can direct all of your animosity and your hatred in one direction. Yep, see these people, they carried out these plans, they conducted themselves, Nazis. Some people extended to the entire German people. We're not talking about that today, but you have a focus. Here's where your anger is directed. But what happens when you take a step back and you start to ask yourself, well, this person, they were also culpable. And that person, they were also responsible. Yes, maybe they didn't hold the gun or hold the axe or the knife or so on and so forth, but they had the ability to change events. They had the ability to get involved, and they chose not to. That makes them all responsible. How do I, as a human being, reintegrate myself into society? What is my response from a tragedy when I start to understand that this is a tragedy that so many people are responsible for? Not just one or not just two. So when you can focus yourself and say, oh, that person did this to me. You can let out your aggression on that person. You can talk to that person. You can deal with that person. There's a certain ease in which you can deal with your feelings. But when you don't have that specific target for your hatred, for your angst and your animosity, when it's widespread, where do you go? How do you pick up the pieces? And how do you move on from that when you have no specific vessel for all of the frustration and the angst that's been built up inside of you? when these people tried through the Holocaust, their goal was to ultimately try to destroy the Jewish people. But it wasn't only done through gas chambers. They never reached the United States. How did they think they were going to handle all of the Jews in the United States? Well, at the Nuremberg trials, they were asked this question. What was their ultimate game plan? Final solution meant for everyone. How are they going to ultimately bring about destruction of Jewish people that weren't under their sovereign control? So, Rudolf Hess, who was the commandant of Auschwitz, said the following. He said, about the millions of Jews living in America, the assimilated Jews of the West would be in no position and would have no desire to make good this enormous loss of blood, and there would therefore be no future generations worth mentioning. He calculated that if you did enough damage, enough destruction, enough isolation, you created enough tragedy connected to Judaism, connected to being Jewish, then very simply, a person would just walk away. They would just fade into the background. Because it would be so overwhelming to deal with that people wouldn't want to. And they would simply walk away. And you know what? He wasn't so wrong. Many people did. In many ways, they did. This was the ultimate game plan. And no one's blaming anyone that did. No one's judging them. That's not the point of tonight's discussion. The point of tonight's discussion is that here you have a situation where the ultimate calamity, the ultimate disaster, on a parallel that's unthinkable, unheard of, is being done. But it's not being done by one person. It's not even being done by one country. There's culpability that goes all around. So how do you respond to that? How do you build from that when you don't have one person or even one group or one community to which you can direct your feelings and frustrations? So, of course, this is not our first time in our history when we've been persecuted. It's one of the nice things is that when we deal with persecutions today, we have so much context. We can really put it in line with what we've achieved. And by no means does that mean we belittle any of those situations. But the reality is that this is something we've dealt with before. So let's go back to Nebuchadnezzar. Mr. Nebuchadnezzar, the big king. Now, as you know, Nebuchadnezzar, by the way, is also related to the story of Purim, because Vashti, the wicked queen that was ultimately killed because she refused to show up at the party, she's a granddaughter of King Nebuchadnezzar. Side note. Remember that they used to marry, kingdoms would marry to try and align themselves. So this king Nebuchadnezzar, he kills a lot of people, he destroys the temple, takes a bunch of exiles back with him to Babylonia. And there in Babylonia, he erects this massive idol. Because that's what we do. If you have extra money, you make a big idol. Money well spent. You know it's going to be there, actually. It's always there. You don't have to worry about it. Inflation, interest, the gold standard. And actually, he made it out of gold. So he has this big idol, and it's mandated that anyone that comes to the capital of the Babylonian Empire must bow down to the idol. That's the rule. No exceptions. Except there's a group of 3 men, 3 sages, that were exiled together with the Jewish people. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And they have names in the Babylonian or Aramean language as well, but this is how they were known in the Hebrew. And they would walk by and they wouldn't bow. Finally, it's noticed, advisors bring it up and say, Mr. Nebuchadnezzar, has it come to your attention that you have these 3 guys, these insolent people, and they don't listen, they don't bow down? He says, really? Bring them forward. So they asked them, why don't you bow down to my idol? And they said, you know what? Gold really isn't our thing. We're much more into precious diamonds. No, that's not what they said. They said that we have one God in heaven, and that's who we serve, and nothing else. Period. End of story. So what did he do? What would you do if somebody told you that? You would build a fiery furnace, and you would put them inside.
Well,
right? And that's exactly what he did. He built a fiery furnace, and he puts them inside. But sure enough, and this is interesting, he puts them in the fiery furnace, and it says that the people that put these 3 guys in the furnace, they themselves started to light on fire because they got so close to the furnace. But the 3 guys inside, nothing happened to them.
No barbecue.
No barbecue. In fact, this story happens 3 times in the Torah. The first happens with Abraham. Abraham was by King Nimrod. He was put inside of a furnace. The second happened also during the Babylonian time with Daniel, the prophet Daniel. He gets put in with a lion, a little similar. And then the fiery furnace again with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So he puts him inside the fiery furnace and nothing's happening. And basically he realizes, all right, these guys, they've got something real. So Nebuchadnezzar comes up and he says, servants of the Most High God, you can come on out. What happened to these 3 sages? They went back to Israel, they married, they had sons and daughters, and they became very prominent leaders of the Jewish people. What is the most powerful part of this story? What do you think, Art?
Gotta have something to do with God controlling everything.
Okay. What do you think, Aaron? 1 vote for God controlling everything.
There was something supernatural going on, but they didn't burn in the...
Okay, so the miraculous nature of the story, that they didn't burn up. Diane? 2 votes for miraculous supernature. All right. Herzl?
I'm still trying to figure out when the bones come into this.
We're not asking about the bones. I'm asking about this
Part of the
story.
story.
But I'm asking about this story. The bones have nothing to do with this story.
It's not connected the 2 with God.
Da, 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 da. Bones have nothing to do with the story. There's no right answer. What do you think? You listen to the story. What strikes you? What strikes you as special and interesting?
You can have a hot time and not get burnt.
You can have the miraculous nature of it. You're all right, but I'm going to throw something else into the picture. One of the most miraculous parts of the story is that these 3 men, who were young men when this story happens, they were not old rabbis, they were young men, study partners, walk away from this event, and they go back to Israel, and they get married, and they have kids, and they become prominent sages and leading rabbis and scholars. To me, that's one of the most miraculous parts of the story. Because when you go through a traumatic experience like that, when you get singled out and selected, and you experience something amazing, and you get saved, when in Babylonia there were Jews being killed every day. Not just Jews, there were other people, everyone being, Nebuchadnezzar killed anyone. They didn't respect people. And for whatever reason, God decides to save you. I don't know why, I don't know how, but this is what happens. And yet, you're not broken by that. You're motivated and inspired. That is the greatest part of the story.
Why would you be broken? I mean, I'd turn around and go, I'd be coming out of there going, right.
Maybe, maybe not. When you go through something traumatic, even if you come through it, there's still the pain that you experienced. It may not be a physical pain, but there's a psychological pain. There was a fear, there was a fright. We don't know what they thought when they went inside there, when they were put inside there, if they were scared, if they thought they were going to die, if the fire was going to burn them up. We don't know any of that. The fact that they just pick 2 people off the street and this person happens to survive and the other person dies, that has a huge impact on people. Well, look at the Holocaust. What?
People are broken.
Absolutely. For someone that goes through the Holocaust, something that we can relate to a little bit more in our time, and turns around and says, I could totally understand if a person turns around and says, this was devastating. I don't want to interact with society. I don't want to bring people into such a horrible, wicked world. All I'm going to do is I'm going to live in my corner, and that's it. You can understand that. And yet, most survivors did not choose to do that. They specifically remarried people that had lost their entire family. They remarried, they had children, they fought to establish the land of Israel. They came to the United States, they built up synagogues and organizations and everything. because they felt that this was their greatest triumph, their greatest obstacle that they had to overcome was the preservation of their way of life, of their identity. That's not an easy thing. That takes tremendous courage. We're looking at the story from Nebuchadnezzar with these guys, Hanan, Mishael, and Azariah, and we're saying, oh, these are rabbis, prominent sages. But they weren't at the time. At the time, they were simple people, young, simple guys, probably in their late teens, that just went through a tremendously difficult experience. And yet they were able to turn it around.
And don't you think when you go through something that traumatic that you don't fear anymore because you've been through possibly the worst thing that could happen, so you gain strength and you do things that you may have never done before.
Sometimes you do gain strength in many
Because-
ways,
because
but
you don't fear.
you do.
Because
You also know tragedy like nobody else does. The concept of fear is different for different people.
when you face fear, I don't think you fear as much. But, I mean, that's just an idea.
I don't know if you fear the pain necessarily that comes with that, but there's fears that deal with a person losing their freedoms, their identity, and so on and so forth. I think those fears still stay with you. And from my knowledge and working with survivors, I think there are still things that they fear in the back of their mind. My grandfather would not talk about the police over the phone in 2012. So I think there are certain things that stay with you, but I think that the motivation and the inspiration that they carry to overcome those obstacles without understanding why they were saved or they weren't saved or how this happened to them or it didn't happen to them, but simply taking the courage to push through is the most motivating thing. I'll tell you a story. In Borough Park, Brooklyn, where you have over 100,000 Jews, hugely Jewish community. And there's tons and tons of different groups and Hasidic groups and non-Hasidic groups, and everybody's rushing and going, and there's lots and lots of schools and yeshivas, a beautiful community in the heart of Brooklyn. And there's lots of school buses. Lots and lots of school buses, because every school has a school bus and it's going here, and if you go to this education and this school and that school and so on and so forth. So there was this old man that would come out every single morning, sit outside his home, and watch the school buses pass through the neighborhood every single morning. He would sit there for 30 minutes until every school bus had passed through the neighborhood and finished his roundup, and he would go in. And he did it day in and day out, and day in and day out, and day in and day out. Finally, one day, he wasn't feeling well, and he couldn't come outside. So the person that was attending to him was looking at him. He sees how sad the man is. He says, "What's the matter?" And he says, "Are you in pain?" He says, "No, I'm not in physical pain. I'm sad that I can't come outside and see the school buses passing through the neighborhood." I didn't understand. Do you have grandkids or something? He says, "No, not specifically." However, after what he experienced in the Holocaust, every day that he goes outside and sees little kids studying and going to yeshiva and going to school and displaying their Judaism in a proud fashion, every day that he sees that, he feels that he won the war, that they overcame the obstacle, that they were victorious, that they succeeded. At the same time, he remembers all of those tragedies. He's not living in denial. He's not insensitive. He remembers everything that took place, all of the pain and the tragedy and the disaster and the loss, but he also knows that he was victorious. It was a terrible fight, terrible war, lost so much, but we did win, and we keep pushing forward. That's what he sees every time he looks out and sees those children. There's another story that's told about Dvir. Dvir was a young Israeli soldier that was fighting in one of the infantry units in the Israeli army. And in 2009, in Operation Cast Lead, which was the operation to go into Gaza after all of the rockets that were falling down. In 2009, they went into Gaza. He was the first casualty of that war. And young kid, 22 years old, passed away, left 3 sisters, and his father had also been a casualty of war years before. So Dvir passed, and it was very emotionally trying for the whole country because people started to realize that this is a real operation and there are losses that we can't get back. Anyway, his family somehow got the courage to move on and continue their lives. And Dalia, his mom, was going to go out with some friends in Jerusalem to the fair. They're going to go out to the fair in Jerusalem every summer. They have a fair. It's called Chutzot Ha'ir, Chutzot HaYotzer. I was there once during it. It's wonderful. It's just outside the old city of Jerusalem, and they have all of these different artists and artisans and craftsmen, and they all show their wares. It's very exciting, and they have outdoor concerts. It's a beautiful, beautiful experience. So they were going to go to a concert. One night they couldn't end up going, and finally, the last minute, they said, oh, you know what? We're going to go tonight. They show up to the concert, and they're sitting in the concert. And this woman in her woman in her mid-50s, she's sitting there, Dalia, the mom of the killed soldier. And the concert's about to start. And she hears someone calling, she sees this little boy, walks up right next to her and starts playing with her shoulder. And mother is about 5 or 10 feet away, and she starts calling out to the boy, and she says, Dvir, Dvir, come over here. So the woman hears the name, and she is caught off guard. So she asks the mom if you would come over for just a second. So the woman comes over to collect her son, and she turns to the woman and she says, your son's name is Dvir. That's a very unique name. And the mother turns back to Dalia and says, well, you know, he was named after a very unique person who lost his life in the operation. She says, well, that was my mom. And started talking, and it turns out that this woman, this mother, was having problems while she was carrying this little boy Dvir. And there was real danger that the pregnancy would not be successful. They would lose a child. And that night, they were in the hospital undergoing an examination, and she hears on the TV screen how this man, Dvir, had lost his life. So when her husband comes back into the room, she says, you know what, I think if God blesses us and this boy is born healthy, we should name him Dvir. And hopefully he'll have the courage to succeed in life just like this soldier, Dvir. But they didn't tell anyone. Because they didn't want to tell anyone until they had asked the mother permission. The baby was born early, it was premature, there was no time to do the circumcision right away, and they had to wait, and then the circumcision was done last minute, and then life got busy, and they never had a chance to call the mother and make contact with her and let them know. But God had a different plan. And God decided that they would meet, and they would come together, and they would share this experience, and they did, and they became close friends, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that this mother told Dalia that night was that Dvir lives on through this little boy. Through this little boy. The circle comes complete. Now, when she looks at that young boy, you think she doesn't think of her son? Of course she does. She thinks of her son, she thinks what he might be, she thinks of all that she's lost, she thinks of the tragedy. Absolutely. We're talking about a healthy, normal woman. But at the same time, she also sees the victory. She sees how her son continues on. His memory, his life, everything that he stood for, his identity, lives on through this young little boy. And how she has inspired this woman and hopefully this boy with courage and with strength and with bravery, just like her son did. This is the story that we all experience in our lives. The story of dry bones, the story of Nebuchadnezzar, the story of the fiery furnace. We constantly are tested. We're constantly facing disasters, calamities of different scales. And we're not comparing whether it's someone's health, someone's financial future, someone's marriage or relationships. Everyone is tested constantly. The only thing you can rely on in life. I used to have a rabbi that would tell me, Mendy, how are things going? I used to say, good, thank God, things are going well. He says, well, be careful. It might not last forever. And a lot of people used to get very set off by that. They get very angry at him. Well, you're so pessimistic, and this and that. And he actually wasn't. He was a very happy, jovial guy. But he was a very honest guy, and he understood that God will send him obstacles, may send him, and probably will send him obstacles. That's part of life. So if things are great now, it may change. But he knew that, and he prepared himself constantly for that. He didn't walk around worried. He was never worried because he knew, you know what? It'll happen like this. We'll deal with it like that. It'll happen like this. We'll deal with it like this. It changes the way you look at things. He was a very misunderstood rabbi, but it took me a little bit of time until I really appreciated what kind of maturity this guy had. And that's the reality in life, is that we always deal with these calamities and disasters. And afterwards, it's hard to move forward. And many people react in different ways. Some people choose the denial. Pretend like it didn't happen. Don't talk about it. Don't think about it. Blot it out of your memory. Keep it in the back burner. And it works. For a week, for a month, for a year, maybe 2. But it doesn't work forever. Because eventually, you will have to confront that. Life will come around. You will have to confront those previous experiences, those disasters and calamities. They will rear their ugly head. You can guarantee yourself. So denial is not effective as a long-term strategy. On the other hand, you can be consumed by it. It can define your life, the misery and the pity, and the melancholy, until you land yourself in total and utter depression. That's another option. And then your life ceases to exist as well. And then you've not been victorious. You haven't survived. It's as if your life ended with that calamity or disaster. Because in many ways it did. Those are 2 options. And many people ultimately, unfortunately, choose one of these 2 options. But do you know what success is? Do you know what victory is? Victory is being able to look that obstacle in the eye, to confront it and say, this was painful. This hurt. I don't wish this on anyone. But here's where I've come since. Here's what I've done as a result of this. Here's the inspiration that this led me to, that ultimately would never have happened had it not been for the incident. This is the strength that I found I was capable of only because I was tested so hardly. That's what Dvir's mother, Dahlia, saw when she saw that little boy. That's what Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah saw when they saw those flames in the fire. That was that spark inside of them saying, I have to succeed. I have to overcome this. I have to be victorious. And the only way I'm going to do that is if I can move my life forward, not backwards. How does this relate to our dry bones? $500,000 question. The dry bones, according to almost all of these interpretations, were individuals that had made tremendous mistakes in their lives. Either they were lacking faith, or they were lacking the performance of good deeds, or they didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead, or all these different interpretations, or they left Egypt too early. There were men that were lacking in good deeds. Not the best citizens of our great land. That's who the dry bones were. So what do we do with these people? Do we give up on them? Do we let them simply stay there in the valley? Do they simply look at their lives and say to themselves, you know what? We made our mistakes. It's done. This is our fate. Just deal with it. And the Torah says no. The whole point of the valley of the dry bones, and According to most interpretations, what happened? They came to life for a few minutes and then they went back to, what took place here? It was to show us that even people that are in a state of dry bones can come back to life. Not only come back to life, but they can come back to the point where they're praising God. Where they get up and they say, you know what? I was slain. This did happen to me. I was dry bones, but I recognize that ultimately I will come alive again. Justice will be served in the ultimate time. That is a powerful example for each and every one of us. That we sometimes are faced with situations that literally dry us out. They sap us of all our energy, our vitality, our strength. We become dry bones. And we may consider this a permanent life sentence. This is what's happened to me. I'm X, I'm Y, I'm Z, I'm this person, and that's who I'll be for the rest of my life. And I simply have to learn to deal with that. The Torah says, no! Just because you're dry bones now doesn't mean you have to always be dry bones. You have the ability to take that situation and bring it to a positive resolution. You can re-inject vitality and strength. And it doesn't mean that you live in denial. It doesn't mean that you discredit what happened, that you don't think about it. No. It means that you come and bring it full circle. You find the strength and the conviction and the energy that you gained only because of that situation. And then you are bringing your dry bones back to life. That's what you're doing. Just like Ezekiel did. So the real reason why they were able to come back to life is because they really never died. There was some sort of vitality that's always left inside of them. And he just came along and he revealed it. That's all he did. Nothing more, nothing less. The same thing is for each and every one of us. We have this strength inside of us, but we ultimately make the decision to use it or not. And as they say, use it or lose it, that's the way it goes. You have to be able to build those pieces of your life and find those connections in order to make it full circle. And no, you may not have a little boy come tapping on your shoulder. It'll be a different way. It'll be a different example, but it will happen. And you will be faced with a choice of looking at that disaster, looking at that obstacle in your life and saying to yourself, how do I define this? And that's what you need. You need definition. How do I define this? How does Dahlia define Dvir's death? It was painful, it hurt, it was terrible, but Dvir was a model of courage, a model of strength, a model of bravery. Hanan and Mishael Nazarian, that fiery furnace, they look at this episode, they see what happened, this terrible thing, and you know what they walk away with? They walk away with saying, wow, our faith is so strong. I don't know why I was chosen or why I was saved and others weren't, but if I've already gone so far, I need to see this through to the end. If I'm still here to fight, if I've dealt with illness, if I've dealt with tragedy, if I've dealt with the relationship that's gone up and gone down, but I'm still here, I'm still alive, I'm still able to fight, then how can I throw in the towel now? I must bring this full circle, bring this to an ultimate conclusion. And that's how we take life's challenges and we turn them into triumphs. Each and every challenge can become a triumph if you are willing to change your perspective. And you're going to have to deal with it. It's going to face you at some point in life. So don't wait till it lands in your lap. Do it now. Take that opportunity now and refocus and reevaluate every step of your life and the decisions and the dilemmas and the disasters and the difficulties and put them in context and build upon that. Because those are your building blocks for your life. You're not going to be given someone else's building blocks. You're going to be given your building blocks. But if you choose to use them wisely, you can build a truly powerful and eternal edifice. And that's the point. That's the point. We are here in this world to ultimately use out every aspect of our being. Every minute should be purposeful and productive. So how can calamity and disaster be purposeful and productive? Here's how. Do we see it right away in the moment? Not necessarily. But 10 minutes later, an hour later, a day, a week, a month, a year, whenever you're ready and you're in that position, make sure that you take the time to align your focus. Don't take any episode of your life and simply throw it away, because you could lose out on a tremendous, tremendous lesson. And that concludes the second book of the 5 books of Moses. So congratulations on making it this far. And of course, learning never ends. We simply continue on and on and on and on and on. If you have any questions about tonight's discussion, feel free to email me, as always, at askmendy@gmail.com, askmendy@gmail.com. There is 10 days left to the Passover Seder. 11 days. Make sure that you're at a Seder, a community Seder, a family Seder, wherever your Seder might be. Of course, you're welcome to join us, and more information can be found on our website. If you need matzah, or you need to sell your chametz, or you need a rabbi to listen to you groan about the trouble cleaning your Passover kitchen, feel free to contact us. We are here to help. Have a wonderful night.